Welcome everybody to today and to JANZSSA's Voices from the Field. It's an absolute pleasure to have you all here. And I'm going to start with an acknowledgement of country. We acknowledge the traditional owners and custodians of the lands across which we meet today, and we pay our respects to their elders past and present, who continue to share their knowledge down through the generations. We honour the continuing connection to and care for community, country and culture of First Nations people, and extend a warm welcome to this presentation to any First Nations people in the audience today. I am logging in from the lands of the Turrbal and Yagara peoples here in Magan-Jinmianjin, Brisbane. Please pop the name of the country that you are logging in from today in the chat. If you're not sure, Google will let you know. I'd also like to draw your attention to this beautiful artwork that I have permission to use. This is Fire Knowledge, Maralia series by Casey Ray. Casey is an Aboriginal woman of the Kamilaroi Nation, and her artwork illustrates the intersectionalities that she experiences as a survivor of domestic and family violence and of sexual assault. Casey is also queer, chronically ill, Black, and a woman, so advocacy and allyship is a strong focal point of her work. I'd also like to introduce you all to the team of associate editors for this section called Voices from the Field. My name is Natalie Ostigo. I'm the Associate Director of Student Success Advising at the University of Southern Queensland. And I'd also like to introduce Caroline Reichert, who is the Professor and Dean of Student Experience and Employability at Griffith University, and also, very importantly, the JANZSSA Editor-in-Chief. Laura sends her apologies for today. So Laura Burge is the Director of SWIC Learning and the JANZSSA Editorial Board team member. We also have Priyanka Chowdhury. Welcome, Priyanka. She is the Manager of Student Wellbeing and Support, Kangan Institute, and a lecturer at Victoria University. And we also have Fiona with us today, who is the Director of Access and Equity from Edith Cowan University. Today we'll be covering a few points. We'll go through the aims, we'll take a look at a little practice prompt, we'll go through the guidelines, we'll look at some examples, we'll talk about the review process, go through some of the submission details, and have time at the end for some questions, although you are very welcome to ask questions as we go. So let's get stuck into it and talk about why we are doing Voices from the Field. I think it's because JANZSSA's primary audience is student services professionals. And we recognise that student service professionals are generally time poor and may also lack experience in research and publishing. So we wanted to create a different genre option for people that was a bit more scaffolded and accessible for people who wanted to dip their toes into writing or who might be new to the field. We wanted to create a space where a diversity of voices could be heard and critical dialogues could occur. So we've deliberately made sure that Voices from the Field is time efficient. There's only a small word count required, although of course that can be its own challenges. Personally, I'm not very succinct, so having only a small word count I find quite challenging, but I'm sure we're all up to it. There is no experience required. There's no lengthy peer review process, and we won't be filtering your voice. We'll only be doing a light editing over the top for clarity. This is really meant to be about confidence building and providing a really scaffolded venue for everyone. And this aligns with our aims and focus for this section. We want it to serve as a platform to feature a broad diversity of perspectives, ideas, reflections, and opinions on key topics and emerging issues. And these are ones that are going to be relevant and timely as they relate to student success, engagement, and well-being in tertiary education. And as we all know, this space is moving so quickly this year. We're hoping to support the emergence of new voices from the field who might not normally be represented within traditional forms of academic publishing, or who may not have the time or interest in interest in working through a lengthy peer review process. So, who can contribute to Voices from the Field? We want to warmly welcome submissions from first-time authors, emerging practitioners, people with lived experience in the field. You don't have to be an experienced practitioner, but you absolutely can be as well. If you have a story, idea, or a reflection about student services, we really want to hear from you. Individual and group submissions are welcome from students, professional staff, academic staff, third space practitioners, and external partners. So basically, everyone is welcome. So what are we going to be asking you to do, basically? Well, your contributions can be written or visual. Written submissions are 75 to 150 words. Citations are absolutely optional. You do not have to have them. If you do decide to include them, please use APA 7 for your in-text citations, and also please include the reference for us as well, because we will be collating all of the references at the bottom of the journal article. Visual submissions should be no more than a third of an A4 size in high resolution or vector format. If you're not sure what that is, please get in touch with us and the amazing Nina will help you to figure all of that out. I'm just going to volunteer her there. As for tone, keep it pretty informal yet meaningful. Submissions can be practical or reflective or aspirational or provocative or all of those things together. You can think about grounding them in personal experience or innovative thinking, but make sure they're always going to be constructive and respectful. You may decide to share your background, role, or experience, and that can be helpful because it would give us, everybody who's reading it, some context into your insights. And the focus should very much be related to student success, engagement, or well-being. It could include things like reflections on programs or initiatives, challenges, opportunities, personal experiences, or new ideas. So, Voices from the Field is inspired by a model which was developed by Professor Alison Cook-Sather and was launched by the International Journal for Students as Partners in May 2021. Cook-Sather created a space to share a diversity of emerging ideas, opinions, and perspectives on important questions about partnership work. And it was wonderful to read responses from students and practitioners to a prompt. And then the author's perspectives were thematically published from the contributions. So, what I would like to do is work through a few examples with you so that you can kind of get a sense of what submissions might look like. So these came from the first journal article, and you can certainly look through that journal article if you would like some more examples. So the prompt was, over the next 3 to 5 years, how might students as partners work develop in a wider variety of contexts around the world and feature a greater diversity of experiences and voices? So here's one of the prompts, and I might reach out to Fiona to read this out loud for us.
Sure, thanks, Natalie. There is an emerging scholarship that seeks to engage with diverse voices in students as partners practices. For students as partners, theorisations and practices to be truly inclusive, they need to bring missing students' voices from non-Western backgrounds to the forefront. This matters for students as partners scholarship because the absence of global voices leads to universalisation and dominance of Western ideas. It prevents students as partners from representing culturally relevant decolonised practices. It's from Bindra et al. 2018, page 11. International students from the Indian subcontinent form a large student population in knowledge economies. These students come from diverse educational experiences, some of whom may not have experienced collaborative teaching and learning in their home country. Understanding their experiences matters as their voices have so far been underrepresented. The inclusion of these voices can bring new insights into how these students perceive and receive partnership practices. That's from Preeta Vayada, a student from India studying at the University of Queensland, Australia.
Thank you so much, Fiona. So let's break this down, and this is going to be the English as an additional language teacher in me. Okay, so stick with me here. So the first sentence of this submission is what we would call a topic sentence. It's a sentence that generally describes what the submission is about. The second sentence describes the overall perspective of the writer and why that perspective is important. They've included a citation there, and again, those are optional. They then follow up with the author's opinion, which is really clearly stated, and then finishes up with a concluding sentence that summarizes the main idea of the submission. So, overall, this is a really logically structured response to the prompt. It's quite beautifully written. But it's also not the only way that a response could be written. So, let's take a look at another example. And I will quickly read this out for everybody. I was first introduced to the Students as Partners ethos when I was tasked with developing a student governance framework at the University of the Sunshine Coast in late 2017. I incorporated this ethos from the ground up and partnered with over 80 students throughout the development and implementation phases. 3 years later, the three-tiered model is fully established and highly regarded by the USC executive. The structure is comprised of 16 student-led groups made up of 142 diverse and fully trained student reps. Throughout 2020, I have had the pleasure of seeing the plan come to life, and each time I see the student voice amplified and manifested in action, I am reminded that climbing Einstein's ladder, 1969 and 2007, truly is possible. Donna Thompson, Professional Staff, Australia. So if we look at breaking this one down a little bit, you can see that it's really quite different from the previous one. It's also really well structured, but it also highlights a more personal response to the prompt. It begins by explaining the author's context and then goes on to describe an innovative process that they put in place. It includes some really explicit outcomes, which are lovely because that really grounds the work. And then it ends with the author's perspective, which is really optimistic and lovely. So I think this is another great example of what a response might look like. The final example I have to show you here is one that includes how a visual could be incorporated, and it also includes a rationale. So, Priyanka, could I please call on you to read out this rationale for us?
Sure. Thanks, Natalie. The creation of a visual analysis, Flowers of Hope. Partnerships among students and professors in higher education are integral for deepening knowledge, developing expertise, and creating innovative scholarship. As a PhD student, I was encouraged to explore creative expression and visual analysis with the context of qualitative research project focused on the journeys of three young women as they aged out of the foster care system. In the United States, that term indicates the youth became 18 while under the care of the state Child Protective Services Agency. This visual analysis was completed through the medium of pottery. The painted tray depicts the traumas, resiliency, partnerships, and supports of the participants' journey. The professor student partnership that fostered this creative representation allowed me an opportunity to incorporate a passion working with those in the foster care system, along with creative expression, and ultimately provide a piece that depicts the struggles and triumph of these individuals. The art of partnership is evident in the professor-student partnership that motivated this work and is depicted by the partnership between myself as a researcher and the participants within the educational research study. Art is inherently reflective of both the subject and the artist, an undeniable partnership. Cindy Freer Conley, PhD, academic coach, Cumberland University, USA.
This was quite a long one, but also, again, really beautifully personal. So what we can see with this example is that we have the visual and then we have the rationale. The rationale, and some people may call this an exposition, explains the idea behind the artwork really clearly. It describes also why it was made and includes the context of the author. Visuals can really be anything. They could be photographs, artworks, posters, infographics, cartoons, animations. The world is your oyster on this one. We love to see some creativity. You may not need a rationale if the visual really speaks for itself. For example, a lot of infographics won't need additional explanation, most likely. If you do decide to include a rationale with your visual, please make sure that you keep it to under 100 words. And finally, you will have noticed that each one of the examples includes a description of the author. And we would love to invite contributors to name dimensions of their identities that you want highlighted. And we will include this below your submission in your own words. And when you go to submit your submission, there's a space for that in our form. So here are some of the examples that we just looked at. So the name, student from India, and where they are studying could be one way to describe yourself. It could also be this one, sport and recreation lecturer, and then the institution and the location. This one, quite a long name. Educational Development Team, Learning Futures, Griffith University, Australia. So that one included multiple authors because it was a group submission. And for example, this is how I might describe myself. Natalie Ostigo, my pronouns, she, her, living on the lands of the Turrbal and Yagara peoples in Magangin, Mianjin, Brisbane, Associate Director of Student Success Advising at the University of Southern Queensland. So quite a long one from me there. If it gets really, really long, we might contact you and talk through how that might be reduced in size. But go for it, please. We would love to see what dimensions of identity that you would like to be highlighted in your submission. So the selection criteria is really straightforward. All the contributions must meet the submission guidelines. There are some rare occurrences when we may exclude a submission, but this will really be because they specifically do not meet the guidelines. For example, if your submission is significantly over the 150 word limit, so if you've given us 300 words, that might be an issue. Please don't. If your submission is really off topic and not at all relevant to the prompt, we're also only accepting submissions from authors once. So, for example, if you've submitted as part of a group and then submit by yourself individually, we would only accept one submission. So, multiple submissions are not allowed. All submissions will be accepted on a first come basis, and we will cap those at 20 submissions. We will only be doing minimal copy editing adjustments, and we will negotiate these with you. And it's really about ensuring the readability of the submission and preserving the contributor's voice. What we will then do when we have received all of those submissions, we will work together as an editorial group and then put those contributions into themes. And this will allow us to give the article a bit of structure and flow. Collective references will be included at the end of the selection, but again, those are absolutely optional. And importantly, all section editors and all contributors will be recognized and included in the section citation. So you will be listed as an author in the citation. I hope you've all enjoyed today's session and that it has clearly explained everything you might need to know about submitting to Voices from the Field. I really appreciate you all joining us today. And if you do think of any questions in the meantime, you are very welcome to contact us via the journal.